Hello and welcome to the HGC. Before we get to the video, just want to real quickly say I do a lot of giveaways on this channel. By all means, go check out my active giveaways playlist. I have new as well as old stuff I give away to people who can't afford it, or just people who want to have some fun trying to win things. So go check out the active giveaways playlist, and now the video. Okay, this is a repair of an HP G7-2269WM laptop. Alright, remove the battery. Always remove the battery before you do remove the cover and go poking around on the inside. Let me move some stuff around here so that everything can stay organized. You have to stay organized taking laptops apart, and trust me, if you have to ask me what kind of a screwdriver you need to use to take this apart, you should not be touching your laptop. Take it to somebody who knows what they're doing. Hard drive in this particular model don't require any screws to remove. It simply unplugs and lifts right out. It's just very easy. Your Wi-Fi, it's got a black and a white wire. If your Wi-Fi card is not marked, take a black marker, mark where the black wire goes, and then remove the things. It's usually one screw, and the little card will flip up, and you just pull it right out. Alright, so we got all of that out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the screws along the back side where the battery is, and keep them all in order. These screws have length differences and size differences, so you always want to keep them in order of where you took them out. Otherwise, if you put a screw back in the wrong hole that's too long, it can actually go down, hit the motherboard, and when you try to power it on, you will fry your laptop. So you notice how I'm kind of scooting them down a little bit as I go. I'm removing all of the screws along the back side of the laptop. So I'm kind of just keeping them all in order. Anytime you're watching a video, it's always a lot easier. It always looks a lot easier in the video than it is in real life. So keep that in mind. If you've never done something like this, probably a good idea not to do it. I mean, it is so easy to mess these things up. If you forget a screw or you miss a screw, and then you're sitting there prying things around trying to figure out why it won't open, you can destroy this thing in a heartbeat. Okay? So now I'm removing the screws along the bottom side of the laptop, which would be technically the front, and I'm keeping them in order as well. Okay, got them all out, and you notice how I'm lining them screws up over there. Very important to keep track of exactly where these go. Okay, now that I got the top and bottom, I'm going to remove all of the screws in the middle here, which are holding the keyboard in place, as well as the upper housing and the lower housing together. Okay, if you forget one of these, you're going to be sorry when you try to remove the upper housing. So make certain that all the screws are out. And notice I kind of decided not to put them in the middle, in between all of them other screws. Actually setting them on the cover, that lets me know that they go under the cover. And now that I've removed the screw for the drive, that just comes right out. And then I'm going to take that screw and put it back in the drive. That way I know for a fact that screw belongs to the drive. Okay, so I'm going to remove a couple more screws here, and I'm placing them in order and orientation of how I removed them. And then I'm going to go through and make certain I remove every screw that needs to be removed. And now we're going to flip it over. And you notice I didn't take out the RAM. It's not necessary for this particular laptop. Some it is necessary, but most not really necessary. Especially if you know what you're doing. If it's the first time of doing it, I would highly recommend you actually remove your RAM chips. Just be very careful not to touch your chips and everything. Now, I'm going to take a flat spudger, which kind of resembles a butter knife, but a lot skinnier and a lot thinner and sturdy. And I'm going to pull up the keyboard. Now, I didn't hook it back up the last time, but the ribbon cable goes right there where that arrow is. It's just a little flip up clip and the ribbon cable come right out. Remove the ribbon cables and let's take a look. This is the dust I was talking about. See how that's brown? That's just a little dust bunny. It's brown. It's from the tar and nicotine of the cigarettes being smoked around it. See, there's the little ribbon cables. Make sure you remove all of the ribbon cables. They were removed previously during my diagnostics of what I needed to replace. And then there's one just below there. And put the screws all in the proper places. Now, when I was taking this apart, I thought I had left all of the cables to the upper housing disconnected except for one, and didn't notice it. You'll see me here in just a moment fumble because I forgot to put that one, or forgot to remove that one because I thought I had already left all of them disconnected. But apparently when I put it back together until the part came in, I had actually plugged that one back up. See right here, if you don't know what you're doing, you won't realize that that's hooked up, and you're going to go, hey, see, I'm pulling that so gentle. The second I felt resistance, I knew that, hey, still have a wire connected. Alright, so that comes right off once you remove them screws and all of the cables are disconnected properly. You see in here how yellow and nasty that is? That's tar and nicotine that's drawn in by the fan pulling in the air of the room. That stuff coats everything in there in a sticky tar. You gotta remove the video cable and your USB cable and the power supply cable. Yeah, that stuff coats everything in a tar layer, and then every single speck of dust will stick to it, which chokes these things out and kills them real quick. Alright, so I'll remove the cable down here, and on this laptop there's only one screw that needs to be removed, and that's right here. And then the circuit board will lift right out very gently. Comes up, and then all the ports will come out. Now you can see that the RAM chips are still in place. Didn't need to remove them. Okay, so we're going to replace the entire fan unit. It's just easier than trying to remove the fan and replace only the fan itself. So we're going to remove 4 screws here. And you'll see the die of the chip here in a moment. Now, I released this, and they had a double-sided sticky tape underneath the fan holding that thing down really good. And due to the heat that this thing was producing over a long period of time, and I'm sorry I'm off screen, that had adhered that fan housing to this board extremely tight, and I was trying to check to see if there was a screw, make certain there wasn't, because usually these things will come apart fairly easy, but not always. So I wound up taking the spudger and very gently and slowly separating the fan from the motherboard, because everything else was disconnected. And I tried one pry tool, decided to go use the spudger instead of it, because it was a little bit too fat. Needed to get between the fan and the board without hitting any components or damaging anything. So the spudgers are a real necessity tool when it comes to laptops and pretty much any electronics. If you don't have one, you know, definitely want to get one if you plan on doing these. See that? It had a set of double-sided sticky tape. Now the fan will spin a little bit turning it, but the dust buildup, thanks to all of the tar and everything in there, basically acted like sandpaper in there and just destroyed the bearing in it, so it wasn't spinning anymore. The laptop would not boot. It would simply say that the operating fan wasn't working, which it wasn't. Alright, so now we're going to clean up the die. You always have to clean up the die. I'm using a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. The thermal paste on this was very dried out, probably from running extremely hot for a good amount of time. You want to clean these up very clean, remove any possible dust or lint or anything like that. And so now I'm going to take the replacement fan, heatsink and all, and they mailed me it. It is a used one, but it's perfectly good. For all likelihood, it will last just as long as this system is, as long as they quit smoking around the laptop. And he sent it to me with old thermal paste on it. I wish he had cleaned it up a little bit, but no worries. A little bit of isopropyl alcohol and we'll get that nice and clean and ready to be applied. Excuse me. So you get that nice and cleaned up there. Now this has got like a black paper guard around it for prevent it from hitting any of the small chips that are on the main chip. So it kind of looks like there's still a little bit of thermal paste on it, but it's not. I'm using Arctic Silver. You always want to use Arctic Silver. It's just the best on the market as far as I'm concerned. Arctic Silver 5. Don't need a whole lot on there, but you want enough that it's going to completely cover the die and have a little bit of excess overlapping. The excess acts as a moisture retention and prevents it from drying out. I see so many people, they put a little teeny little dot on the die and then spread it super thin. Well, if you do that, and you notice my screws ain't going in because the little retainer on the back, which actually holds the screws in, had come off, and I didn't realize that until just a second from now. You'll see. But back to that thermal paste. If you use it that way, you can actually create a bubble. You don't want to spread that thin. You want a good sized amount on it. The die pressing down will spread it down thin without any air bubbles whatsoever. That will act as a insulator and cause your chip to get hot. Right, if you do it just like I showed you here, the die will spread it perfectly thin. It will leave an excess amount over the outside of the chip. You don't want a massive excess amount, but just a little bit. And that'll act as a moisture barrier to prevent it from drying out prematurely. Okay, so I'm going to plug the fan in, and we're all ready to go. Okay. Replacing the fan is not all of that hard. It's mainly just, you know, taking the system completely apart, and not damaging anything in the process, and knowing what you can and cannot touch on that circuit board. Touch the wrong chip and you can fry it, especially if you're working on a carpet or anything like that, or on a bed like I see a lot of these guys doing on their YouTube videos. You run a risk of creating static, and that would be like you being hit by lightning. You know, it's just not good for the chips. Now, here in my shop, I will usually wear an ankle strap that will eliminate any possibility of a static discharge, and I will also ground out from time to time on the computer housing, which is off to my right, which you cannot see in the video. So that helps prevent, look at that, oh gosh, I'm going to clean up as much of this stuff as I can off of the vent and around the hinges and stuff. Again, the majority of this was actually cleaned out the first time I opened it, but I'm going to do a little bit of spot cleaning here just to make sure it's nice and clean on the inside, to help prevent the dust that gets pulled in through the air from sticking back to any of the tar that's in there. I mean, it's not like I can actually just stick this thing in the washing machine and go. So we're going to clean that up best we can. And now we're going to reinstall the board. That remove this USB ribbon out of the way, and make sure the circuit board is in place. And go ahead and attach this cable here. Now these little clip-on cables, they can be a pain sometimes. You want to make sure they're in place and all the way down. Sometimes they can feel like they're attached and not be. Okay, so where was I? Okay, got to put the screw back to hold that motherboard in place, and then we're going to reattach the ribbons and the monitor cable here. Now watch this monitor cable. It's a real pain in the butt. Looks like it's in place. Go to push it down, don't want to go. Move it over a little bit, move it over a little bit, push it down. Okay, so yeah, make certain it's in place and all the way down, otherwise you might have to totally disassemble your entire laptop again in order to get your screen to work. So yes, that is a lot of dust you see on the screen of the laptop. That'll all get cleaned up prior to the customer coming and getting it. But yeah, it was pretty dirty when I got it. Alright, so I'm going to plug in the power, and I'm going to plug in the ribbon cable for the USB on the right side of the laptop there. And then I'm going to push that USB back into place, because the screw that holds that in is part of the upper housing, and it needs to be in the right place. Otherwise, when you go to put your upper housing on, you won't be able to, because the screw won't go in. Now, whenever you're putting screws in, always turn them to the left first. Lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. Why would you turn it to the left if you're putting it in? Well, it's simple. You're screwing into plastic, so you want to turn your screwdriver slightly to the left until you feel a little click, and then turn it to the right to tighten it. That way you line up your threads with the plastic threads, and the screw goes in very nice and clean. If you don't do that, you'll cross thread it and strip it out. Okay, now did a little cleanup on the underside of the upper housing, and now we're going to clean up right underneath where the keyboard goes and install the screws. But I'm going to kind of click this into place, make sure everything's all lined up. Okay, right here's that screw that held that USB in place, as well as the upper housing to the lower housing. Okay, and then we're going to do the rest of them. Left a little bit, turn to the right. Left a little bit, turn to the right. Left a little bit, turn to the right. Screw them all the way down. This is not a car. For God's sakes, don't wrench these things down so tight that you'll strip them getting them out. You snug them up, and that's it. They don't need to be super uber tight. I get so many of these laptops where people tried to fix them and then they tighten them things down so tight that they actually break off the posts on the casing, or strip them out, or when you go to try to remove the screw, it strips out the head. I mean, that's just unnecessary. Okay, so a pair of tweezers goes a long way to helping you guide these ribbon cables back into their clips. Make sure they're in, straight, and locked in place. Power cable back in, plugged up, and we got our little ribbon over here for the on-off switch, or power button if you want to call it that. There's lots of technical terms. I'm not going to give you guys a lot of technical terms. Not going to give you guys a lot of technical terms on these things, because quite frankly, you don't need to know unless you go to school, right? I mean, you can see what I'm doing. You're going to be doing it on the exact same laptop. Hopefully, you actually watch the entire video start to end before you go tearing it apart. And if you don't, and you ask me a question on the video, I'm probably going to chew you out for doing it. Okay, so we're going to reinstall the ribbon cable for the keyboard. You want that in nice and straight, flush, counter, lock down, and then flip the cable over, insert the lower clips, and then push it all down, click it into place. And don't worry about that phone call. It wasn't my customer, it was my wife, and I'm going to ignore her for a few minutes until I get done narrating this video. Okay, so I got the keyboard in place. Now it's time to reinstall the keyboard screws and all the stuff to the back side of the laptop. Okay, so we're going to inspect everything, make sure everything's lining up, and we're going to start installing the screws to the keyboard and to any of the housing screws that are beneath the cover plate first. That way I know what exactly I've done. I know exactly where the screws go because I kept them in order and orientated so that I know exactly where they go. We're going to reinstall the disk drive. Remove the screw that I put there. That way I know that is the proper screw. Put the proper screw in the proper hole and you'll never have a problem putting your system back together. Alright, this will just slide right in, plug into place, and then you take that screw, lock it in place, and we're all good to go. Now, DVD drive is now installed. We're going to take a hard drive and install it. This one has a rubber stopper, and it simply slides beneath the two clips there, and then the little cable goes in and locks down, and the rest of that's actually held in place by the back cover, so there's no screws involved in that. Not a bad design. I actually kind of like it. Alright, so now we're going to put our Wi-Fi back in. Now this will just slide in. It'll be kind of like at a little 45-degree angle in there, and then it'll kind of bounce up and down like as if it's on a spring. There'll be one screw that holds it in place. put the screw back in the same hole you took it out of. In this case, it'll be the lower side. I don't know if yours is going to be on the upper or right. Okay, and then once we get that screw in place, we're going to attach the black and white wire, black wire to the proper place where it came off, and the white wire to its proper place where it came off. You don't want to be reversing them. Put them back exactly where they come off. Alright, now that we got them, and I think I just remembered, there's several screws that go along the bottom side that go in first, so me thinking about what's on the video made me forget to put them back in. So I'm going to put in the entire lower line, where you'll see that there's at least 2 or 3 screws that actually are below that plate. Yeah, it was 2 screws that were below the plate. We're going to put the entire lower set of screws in right now. There we go. And then I'm going to put the back cover back on. Okay, back cover is in place and all on. I'm going to go ahead and tighten that down. And you'll notice I still got a line of screws. I'm going to start from one side and put them all in the exact same holes. Remember, turning slightly to the left and then to the right will get you perfect alignment of your screws every time. Does it look like I'm tightening them down like an auto mechanic tightens a screw or a bolt in a car? No. Okay, just down snug, maybe 1/8 of a turn more. It doesn't need to be uber tight. Right? They just need to be in place and snug down to lock everything in place the way it's meant to be. Okay, so now we got all the screws in. I'm going to take the battery pack and put that in. And turn it over and fire it up, make sure everything's working properly, and then we'll work on cleaning up the outside and all that nasty cigarette lint dust all over the front of it. Clean up the keyboard so it looks at least decent when the customer comes and picks it up.